Ember's Wake Book 1, The Lost Son. Chapter 2, Whispers of Cinder. The hollow seethed with a feverish lunacy that devoured the remnants of a ruined city, its chaos spreading unchecked like an insidious plague. Amid fractured streets and shattered dreams, ruthless warlords and desperate scavengers clashed with savage intensity before moments of uneasy, deceptive calm swept over them. The city itself appeared as a living wound, a grim testament to relentless turmoil, breathing anguish with every shattered echo. In this volatile arena, Kaelen maneuvered with a precision that belied the surrounding pandemonium. Rather than hastily charging headlong into the fray, he navigated the darkened alleys with an artful subtlety. His tactics, intricate and deliberately obscure, were designed to weave him unseen through the shifting chaos. Pausing briefly beneath a twisted archway, his senses distilled the violent ballet around him into a series of calculated opportunities. In his periphery, colossal factions enacted brutal skirmishes, 1 minute dueling within the ruins of a forgotten factory, the next inscribing their defiant marks in the dim light of a dying city. A particularly striking tableau unfolded nearby, a fierce band of Rustborn, whose very existence evoked the raw, untamed force of nature. These survivors, clad in armor crudely forged from the carcasses of fallen machines and battle-worn gear, appeared as living testaments to decay and survival. More than a mere faction, the Rustborn embodied a relentless instinct, ruthless, unbound by strategy, thriving on the nihilism of the hollow. Their corroded apparatus and blood-stained scars stood as a constant reminder to Kaelen of the abyss into which one could easily descend. Yet he kept moving toward them, an unsettling pull that defied his every instinct. Hidden in the shadows, Kaelen realized he was moving nearer, not away, from the approaching chaos. "What am I doing?" he wondered aloud in his mind, the thought so intense he worried others might overhear it. He had always known how to wait out the madness, to let its fury burn itself to ash before emerging unscathed. This was reckless, illogical. Just wait it out, he urged himself, yet he couldn't manage to stay still. The deeper force wound through him like a current too strong to resist. Drawing ever closer to the heart of devastation, Kaelen approached an impact site, a vast, charred crater that sliced deep into the city's rotting flesh. Here, the landscape pulsated with the feverish heat of recent ruin. A dance of twisted metal and broken glass marked the site as a theatre of both overt violence and subtle stratagem. Factions surged in tumultuous waves, fleshmongers sweeping in like a violent tide, while ashen tongues engaged in battles punctuated by the acrid stench of cigarette smoke and exhaust. Amid this orchestrated mayhem, his movements were anything but obvious. A calculated flick of scrap, a coy rustle of discarded refuse, a series of delicate misdirections ensured that his approach remained obscured, his intentions hidden behind layers of deliberate complexity. Every fleeting pause within the relentless melee presented Kaelen with a measured plan. His measured steps, echoing softly against the ruin, carried him closer to a distinguished glimmer amongst the debris, a sign that his elusive target lingered within the abyss. The deathscape radiated an austere beauty, its tumult intermingled with moments of eerie stillness that Kaelen exploited as strategic sanctuaries. Each burst of violence and every deceptive lull coalesced into a rhythm known only to him. It was in these orchestrated intervals, amid the clamour of gunfire and anguished cries, that he found the clarity to redefine his path. At last, standing at the edge of the smouldering scar, Kaelen absorbed the city's final resonant call. Among the swirling chaos, his eyes locked onto a singular glimmer, a beacon hidden amidst the wreckage. In that silent, potent heartbeat, the narrative of the Hollow and his own destiny converged, poised to be rewritten by a man whose clever, subtle tactics allowed him to remain the silent arbiter amid an impassioned maelstrom. A sudden flash, a fleeting glint, a brief glimpse of the impossible, catches his eye amidst the shattered remnants. In the midst of devastation, a tiny fragment pulses like a dying star, flickering with a mysterious energy that defies his comprehension. He is unable to discern its nature. He only senses that something about it is profoundly wrong, yet undeniably alive. It is unsettling, drawing him in with an inexplicable force, silently calling to him. Ignoring it is not an option. Compelled by an irresistible pull, he navigates through the chaotic landscape of debris, his heartbeat accelerating with each step. Yet, when he finally reaches the spot where the pull feels the strongest, he finds nothing but a desolate expanse of ash and dust. A barren, lifeless stretch. Had he not just seen whatever he was searching for? He questions himself. Was he losing his sanity? There is no visible reason for his presence there, yet he knows he must be there. He feels it deep within, his heart pounding, his palms damp with sweat. He does something he knows he should never do while wandering the streets. He closes his eyes. And there it is, buried beneath the remnants of what and who were too close to the impact. It lies hidden, elusive and mysterious. He doesn't know what it is, nor can he truly comprehend its appearance. All he has is the burning desire to unearth what he is irresistibly drawn to. The nearer he comes to that silent, tense moment, the more desperate the pull becomes, cutting through the chaos and rendering the world around him irrelevant. The scavengers inch closer, their frantic search forming a backdrop to his singular focus. In that charged stillness, his mind becomes a tempest of instinct and longing, drowning out all caution. With no plan, his fingers start to dig into the unyielding ash, convinced that the forbidden presence is concealed just beneath the surface. The act is both reckless and inevitable, a final, fated move against the dense silence of the wasteland. As he digs, time stretches into a single, breathless moment where only need and destiny exist. The world around him dissolves, leaving him with a profound certainty that what he seeks is there, waiting to be claimed, as misplaced and compelling as he feels himself in this fractured world. His hands claw deeper into the ash, the grit tearing at his skin, each frantic motion increasing his desperation. Kaelen's thoughts spiraled inwards, a chaotic storm of doubt and obsession. Was he chasing shadows? Had the madness of the Hollow finally claimed him? He willed himself to stop, to abandon this lunacy. Yet he dug faster, possessed by a need that eclipsed his own survival. Just as despair neared suffocation, his fingertip brushed against something cool and unyielding. A sudden, primal shock surged through him, coursing up his arm, along his spine, and into his mind, slicing through his thoughts like pure light. The scent of rust, smoke, and decay vanished. The weight of the air, thick with filth and desperation, lifted. The ever-present hum of distant machinery, the muffled echoes of struggle and suffering, the distant screams, all gone. In their place, silence, and then wind. A breeze, warm and fragrant, carried the scent of something Kaelen had never known. Life. He opened his eyes. He was no longer in the Hollow. Before him stretched a garden unlike anything he had ever seen. The sky above was vast, endless, and so impossibly blue that it felt as if the color had never existed before this moment. Clouds drifted like silken threads, glowing faintly with golden light, as though the sun itself had woven them into the sky. The air was soft, clean, untouched. Each breath filled his lungs with something that made his chest ache. A purity, a freshness that felt almost unnatural after years of breathing the hollow's stagnant rot. Beneath his feet, the ground was not metal, not shattered concrete, not ruin. It was soft, lush, covered in grass. Not the sparse, brittle weeds that sometimes push through the cracks of the hollow, but a sea of vibrant green swaying gently in the wind. Flowers bloomed in impossible colors, petals shifting as though alive, catching the light in ways he had never seen before. Birds, real birds, not the mutated scavengers of the hollow, flitted through the air, their feathers catching the sun in shimmering streaks of silver and gold. Strange creatures moved through the trees, their forms elegant, untouched by hunger or fear. Nothing here fought for survival. Nothing clawed desperately to exist. Everything was perfect. For a moment, Kaelen simply stood there, unable to move, unable to breathe. The weight of what he was seeing crushed him more than the hollow ever had, because this was not just another world. This was a world that should not exist. He stepped forward, hesitant, almost afraid that if he moved too quickly, the illusion would break. His fingers brushed against a tree, smooth, strong, warm beneath his touch. It did not crumble. It did not die beneath his fingertips. It was real. A sound drifted through the air, the faint rush of water. He followed it. The garden stretched on, untouched and endless. The path he walked was not carved by industry or war, but by nature itself, winding through rolling hills, past flowering vines that glowed faintly in the dimming light. There was no ruin here, no machines, no scars of battle, no echoes of a world trying to devour itself. Then the trees thinned, and he reached the edge of a cliff. Kaelen's breath caught in his throat. Before him lay a city of pure beauty. Towering palaces stretched toward the heavens, carved from gleaming stone, their spires entwined with golden vines that pulsed with light. Bridges of translucent crystal arched over cascading rivers, threading through the city like veins of liquid silver. Streets paved with something that shimmered like glass stretched between buildings that seemed more like sculptures than structures, each crafted with such delicate precision that it felt as though they had grown from the earth itself rather than been built. Above it all, a great tower loomed at the city's heart, taller than anything he had ever seen, its pinnacle lost in the clouds. Light emanated from everything, not artificial, not forced, but natural, like the city itself was alive. This was not a place of war, not a place of suffering. This was a paradise, a world untouched by ruin, a world untouched by him. Kaelen's hands curled into fists. He did not belong here. This was not real. It couldn't be. Something in his bones told him this place was not for him. He was an invader, a ghost of a world that had no place in this purity. He stepped back, away from the cliff, expecting the familiar coil of tension in his chest. But it didn't come. For the first time in as long as he could remember, he was not afraid. The silence deepened, but not the heavy, suffocating kind that filled the hollow before violence erupted. The air no longer carried the weight of survival. There was no hunger gnawing at his ribs, no lurking figures waiting to take what little he had. For once, he was not being hunted. Kaelen exhaled slowly. The city below remained untouched, its rivers flowing, towers gleaming, but something had shifted. The space around him felt aware, not dangerous, not threatening, just watching. He turned. A figure stood before him. It did not startle him. It did not unsettle him. If anything, its presence felt as natural as the wind, as if it had always been here, simply waiting for him to notice. It was neither solid nor formless, woven of light and something softer than light. No clear face, no distinct edges, just a presence shaped like a man. It did not breathe, did not move, but it was alive in a way he could not describe. Kaelen held its gaze, if it even had one. The figure said nothing. It only watched. Then it spoke. One word, a command. Run! A crack shattered the stillness, loud and violent, snapping the world back into chaos. How long had he been standing there? It might have been seconds, minutes, or even hours. He couldn't tell. Where had he been? It was too vivid to be a dream, yet too stunning to be real. They were closing in. Kaelen couldn't afford to think any longer, so he ran. He had no idea how long his legs would hold out, how long he could stay ahead of them, how long he could survive. He knew only that stopping wasn't an option. Gunfire split the air. A second shot followed. The sound rippled through the hollow like a death knell, a sharp, inevitable promise. Fires licked at the broken walls of decayed structures, casting jagged shadows that twisted and convulsed like dying things. Smoke thickened the air, coiling between shattered alleyways, suffocating and bitter with the stench of burning oil and scorched flesh. The ground shook, not from nature's wrath, but from the weight of bodies moving as one, drawn by bloodlust. Somewhere, metal groaned as an entire building caved in, sending a shockwave of dust and debris through the streets. Sparks showered from exposed wiring, flickering out like dying stars before vanishing into the dark. Voices clashed with the distant roar of destruction, shouts, screams, the sharp hiss of energy weapons. The hollow had devoured itself entirely, swallowing everything in a savage feast of destruction. Kaelen risked a glance over his shoulder and saw them. Figures swarming the ruins in his wake, flickering silhouettes cast into sharp relief by the firelit carnage. Warlords, scavengers, mercenaries, none of them would stop. All of them desperate, all of them ravenous to claim the thing he carried at any cost. He knew their type. He had been their type. Now he was their prey. Kaelen ran. His breath tore at his throat like razors. His legs screamed with every stride, but slowing down meant death. Stopping meant worse. And death was not an option. Not now, not with the shard's pulse like a rhythm inside of him, urging him onward, feeding him the will to survive. A shot seared past his shoulder, close enough to singe flesh. He threw himself sideways, barely dodging the bolt that vaporized a chunk of the wall beside him. Heat blistered against his skin, the acrid stench of melted steel stinging his nostrils. He hit the ground hard, but let his momentum carry him through the roll, pushing him upright before he lost precious seconds to the pain. There, he's got it. Another shot. Kaelen twisted into a side street, heart hammering wildly. His mind raced with a single urgent thought. He had to disappear. The hollow was a labyrinth. He knew its veins, its arteries, the places that led nowhere, and the ones that ran deep into the Undercity. A lifetime spent in the shadows had taught him how to move unseen, how to become invisible. But tonight, he wasn't invisible. Tonight, they saw him, and he knew they would never stop chasing him. A narrow alley opened up ahead. Kaelen launched himself over the rusted carcass of a transport vehicle, just barely clearing the jagged metal protruding from its frame. His lungs burned with the effort, the air thick and punishing, but he forced himself onward, weaving between obstacles, cutting through abandoned structures, always one step ahead. The object pulsed in Kaelen's hand, its presence within him a vivid streak of light and awareness. It guided him through the chaos, its whispers mingling with the sounds of pursuit. The hollow blurred around him, a twisting, spiraling wake of decay and danger. He knew he couldn't keep this pace forever. But he didn't have to. Not if he found a place to vanish. Not if he made it to the tunnels. Hurry! That meat husk must be here somewhere. A voice cut through the confusion, raspy and grating. The Rustborn had no respect for the fragile, fleeting forms of unaugmented beings. To them, flesh alone was an insult to survival. Weak, impermanent, destined to decay. Bone could be shattered, muscle could wither, blood could spill and dry. But metal endured. Metal was strength, unyielding and eternal. Those who had not been reforged, who still clung to their soft, breakable bodies, were nothing but meat husks, temporary vessels waiting to rot. Kaelen pushed harder, his body straining against exhaustion, desperation consuming him. He felt the Obegh's urgency, a shared desire to elude capture, to escape. He ducked through a gaping breach in a crumbling wall, feet slipping on corroded metal, arms pumping to regain balance. Shouts followed, the clatter of boots on steel, the vibration of an entire hive closing in. The hollow itself seemed alive, conspiring against him, echoing his every movement, amplifying his terror. The alley narrowed, its path choked with debris and the skeletal remains of machinery. Kaelen vaulted over a stack of twisted piping, not slowing, not hesitating. His instincts, honed by years of surviving, told him he should have been losing them by now. But they were still there, closer. The certainty cut into him like a dull blade. He had to take them deeper, wind them into the confusion of the ruins, use the hollow's madness to his advantage. He had to shake them, before his endurance gave out, before their numbers closed in, before they took everything. Suddenly, the alley forked, splitting into two precarious paths. Kaelen didn't think. He took the one that sloped downward. A collapse had cleared this way to the tunnels months ago. He remembered it. He had used it. It was dangerous, unstable, a risk most wouldn't take. But they weren't him. They didn't have his knowledge of the hollow. He could lose them here. He had to. The passage plunged deeper into darkness. Kaelen felt the air cool around him, the sounds of pursuit fading. He was beyond the reach of the others, beyond their vision, beyond... His foot slipped. He stumbled, sprawling against the jagged walls, the shock of impact jolting through him. Pain flared in his side, his shoulder, every part of him screaming. He forced himself up, ignored the agony, cursed the sudden weakness that slowed him. Another shot rang out, distant but deliberate. They were still coming. They hadn't given up. They hadn't lost him. Kaelen's thoughts spiraled, frantic and raw. He pushed forward, even as his body protested, staying on the move, staying alive. The tunnel twisted. Sharp turn. Another split. A drop ahead. Kaelen's mind mapped the maze, traced the routes, remembered faster than he could run them. He was getting close now, close to where he needed to be, close to... A dead end loomed. He veered sharply into another dead-end passage. "Damn it," he muttered, as his heart pounded in his chest. As he turned, a massive brute draped in scavenged armor, weapon raised in a menacing arc, stood at the mouth of the alley. This couldn't have been it. It couldn't end this way, not after everything. For years he survived, moving through the hollow without being seen, without being caught, without making a single mistake. Now, the years of slipping through cracks had collapsed around him. He had miscalculated. This thing, the visions, the fall, it was all different now. Different rules, different risks, and he wasn't ready for them. The brute lifted his weapon. "I got you now, little Methusk," he said with a grin that had seen hundreds of souls leave their body. Kaelen heard a shot ring out. It ripped through the air, a crack of violence that he fully expected would mean his end. But it wasn't him who was hit. The brute's body lurched, the shot sending him reeling backwards, arms flailing as his weapon clattered to the ground. Blood seeped through the seams of the crude armor as the massive figure collapsed. Confusion gripped Kaelen for a split second before clarity struck. It was another Rustborn, driven by greed and an impatience that matched Kaelen's own desperation. The attacker had shot the brute instead, removing an obstacle in a bid to claim the prize. The moment of betrayal sparked chaos, a frenzy of shouts and accusations as the Rustborn turned on one another. Kaelen frantically scanned his surroundings. The sudden shift had bought him precious seconds he couldn't afford to waste. The passageway had to be here, someplace only he would try, any way that would get him out of this. There. A narrow gap showed itself, just wide enough to squeeze through. He ducked into the opening. He could still hear them, arguing, shooting, killing. He did not look back. The passage sloped downward, its surface slick beneath his feet as he plunged into the Undercity, the forgotten bones of the Hollow. Here, the air was thick with damp rot, steeped in the stench of decay and rusted metal. Water dripped from unseen pipes, pooling in stagnant basins that mirrored the dim, flickering emergency lights still clinging to life. They wouldn't follow him down here, would they? Slowing his pace. Kaelen pressed his back against the nearest wall, his chest rising and falling in uneven gasps. The object in his palm remained warm, pulsing beneath his fingertips. It had been silent for long, no whispers, no familiar visions. Only a slow, rhythmic thrum like a heartbeat echoing just beneath the surface. A sickening dread curled in his stomach. He had seen their faces. The hunger in their eyes went beyond mere greed. The moment they saw what he carried, they snapped at one another, brothers, allies, strangers, driven by what you couldn't even describe as primal. Just pure evil. He had to keep moving. The tunnels stretched endlessly, a labyrinth of collapsed corridors and buried passageways. Now, every step was measured with caution, his senses keen for any hint of lurking danger around the next bend. The Hollow murmured the legends of these ruins, stories of those who once ruled here and the forgotten souls who still haunted its depths long after time had claimed them. Kaelen never put his faith in such tales, and he had no desire to vindicate them. After what felt like an eternity, he discovered a refuge beneath the wreckage of an old processing plant. The walls had caved inward to form a cramped hollow, a place where a body could vanish, unseen and unheard. It wasn't much, but it had to suffice for now. The ruins above were energetic and tumultuous, filled with clamour and restless movement. But down here beneath the surface, there was only a calm stillness. The air was cool and damp, and the walls, slick with unexplained moisture, held on gently with soft traces of rust and mould creeping through small cracks. The tunnels gently enveloped him, commanding in their presence, yet inviting a quiet reflection. Kaelen knew this place well. He had been here before. The boy who observed life with patient eyes, who knew instinctively when to run or hide, now felt the ease of familiarity with the shard, the mysterious object that pulsed quietly in his grasp. A boy once estranged from a world that had never embraced him, now found solace in these underground corridors. The air, although unmoving and cool enough to bite, was a welcome change from the chaotic atmosphere above. a space thick with blood, smoke, and desperate violence. Here he breathed in the odor of old metal and mold, feeling it settle around him like a soft blanket, gradually washing away the tension that had long haunted his every step. He knew he had to keep moving. Survival required it. Yet in this moment, with the oppressive urgency fading away, he allowed himself a pause. As he listened to the gentle echoes of his footsteps, the heavy silence transformed into a companion that cradled him instead of crushing him. Alone with the shard and the serene quiet, Kaelen felt a rare and unexpected sense of peace. His eyes slowly adjusted to the soft glow of bioluminescent fungi clinging to ancient stone. Their light cast delicate shifting patterns that danced across the walls, like shadows that whispered rather than threatened. There was no promise of safety in this muted luminescence, but it offered just enough illumination for him to see and to be at ease with what lay ahead. In a small alcove where the stone walls receded just enough to grant him a brief respite, Kaelen sank down, cradling the object in his hands. For the first time, he had the opportunity to truly examine it, beyond the quick glances he'd managed while trying to endure the chaos above. He scrutinized the object intently. It rested in his hand, sharp, irregular, unlike anything he'd encountered before. The surface was rough yet smooth, shifting with colors that changed just as he thought he understood them. Its weight was immense, pressing on him with a gravity that pulled at his mind and spirit. What was this object? A shard. But from what exactly? Why did it strike such a profound chord within him? It seemed neither crafted by human hands nor born from nature. It was otherworldly, beyond understanding, a shard of something far greater than anything the hollow contained. The shard pulsed gently in his hand, a constant presence that was firm but strangely soothing. The longer he held it, the more he felt its pull, a deepening connection that transcended fear and survival, reaching into something he couldn't quite name. It was like the echo of a memory that had always been there, simmering beneath the surface, and now drawn out by the object's insistent thrum. No longer was it just an urge to possess, or an instinct to hide. It was a bond that felt as integral as the blood in his veins and the breath in his lungs. It enveloped him, speaking to a part of him he never knew existed, a part that embraced the unknown like an old friend. The same quiet serenity that filled the tunnels seeped into him, pulling him into its rhythm. As the shard compelled him inward, Kaelen found himself letting go of the frantic urgency that had driven him above. He was beginning to understand, beginning to see that this sense of connection was more profound than simple ownership, more enduring than any need to run. Where once the object had seemed a burden, now it offered a strange kind of solace, a promise that as long as it pulsed with life he would be more than just a fugitive in a hostile world. He would be something else, something that had yet to reveal itself. Alone with the object and the stillness around him, he experienced an unexpected moment of peace, a pause in the chaos, a suspended breath that allowed him to truly hear the silence. Tired yet determined, he rested in the soft embrace of the quiet, realizing that even alone, in the depths of ancient tunnels, there could be serenity. It was as if he was melting into the cool embrace of the ground, with the comforting weight of the shard pressing against his chest. Memories flooded his mind like a gentle stream, transporting him to a place of peace and solace